Okay, guys, so this will take you through the poem Futility step by step. The poem itself, we're trying to focus on this particular question when we're looking at futility. How does Owen use the natural world to lament the pointlessness of war? And when we say lament, we mean to passionately express grief or sorrow. So this is a poem that is, in some ways, a lamentation, which is the noun form of the same word, that expresses grief or sorrow for the pointlessness of war. And you picture this scenario because this is the one that it describes. Early on a snowy winter morning in the trenches, an onlooker witnesses the sun beaming down on the body of a dead young soldier. It almost looks as if it could bring him back to life. Think about how many different things in this scenario are futile or pointless. The endeavour to bring him back to life, the loss of life in the first place of the young soldier. All of these things are the futility that this poem is about. The futility being a waste of time, a wasted effort, something that achieves no outcome. Now, first thing to do is check through this technical terminology before you go into the annotations of the poem itself. If this is the time where, if you're looking at pun or personification or a line break or an internal rhyme, and you don't know what these techniques are, pause the screencast at this point, check out Google an explanation, note it down on your copy of the text, and then go back and start looking at the screencast itself. So, the poem starts with the line, "Move him into the sun. Gently its touch awoke him once." Now, in the opening of this, the verb move him into the sun is quite gentle. It suggests respect and kind treatment from the sun itself. So it suggests that the sun in some way is doing something beneficent, something kindly towards the body of this dead soldier. And so we have this suggestion there of a kind of a gentle, tranquil atmosphere in the opening line that is slightly at odds with the horror of the death of the soldier that we're looking at. Moving him into the sun, I think, also functions as a metaphor, a physical metaphor, comparing the movement of the body with the ascent to heaven, as if by moving him into the sun that's shining on the ground, we're moving his soul into the heavens, and therefore in some way redeeming this despairing situation that we see here. Gently its touch awoke him once. And we think here of the personification of touch, that the sun itself awakes the man, which suggests a previously intimate relationship between the man and the natural world, as if at one point it had this close intimacy with the man, enough to be touching him gently in the morning to wake him. Its touch awoke him once at home, whispering of fields unsown. So we have this line break at the end of the second line. Gently its touch awoke him once at home, which is emphasizing the difference between the way the sun treated the soldier in England before the war and on the battlefield. So gently its touch awoke him once, pause, at home. And obviously the implied meaning there is that that's not the case this time round. The internal rhyme here between home and unsown links the idea of the soldier's unfulfilled destiny in his life in England. So if you think here that the two words are connected through this internal rhyme, and actually it's assonantal, it's assonance also. It links the idea of that unsown fields with his life in England, as if the life that has been left behind in England will never be sown, will never be grown and fulfilled. And it's whispering of those fields. So the sun again is personified, reminding the man of his work to do in the field. So we presume in these opening lines that the man that we're looking at here is probably a farmer who has had to go to the front in the First World War and has died. Always it woke him, even in France, until this morning and this snow. And so the imagery here of this morning and this snow portrays a sudden shift, suggesting the movement from life in the past to death in the present. And the repetition of the word this brings us up to this present tense moment, this morning and this snow. And now the situation has changed radically. There is no rejuvenation going to take place for this man. If anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. So we have here, if anything here might provoke him, it might arouse him now. The kind old sun will know about it. The kind old sun would have an idea. Obviously, the meaning here is unstable. We don't really think anything can rouse him. But this word is also importantly a pun. It's a word with two meanings. One being to awaken something and the other being to create anger. And so we look at it now as the potential to wake him up, but also to anger this man who has died at them, and anger us looking at this man who has died for such a pointless endeavor. And so that pun there, meaning both to awake and to create anger, gives us this sense of the man potentially being awoken by his own anger, and ourselves as observers being roused by the experience of the futility of death, watching someone die with absolutely no reason for it at all. Now again, in the second stanza, there are these technical features that I wanted to emphasize. So again, this is the point in time where if you're uncertain about any of these technical features, particularly I would advise checking a compound phrase. Now is the time to Google those and see what you find. So we have this second final stanza. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of a cold star. This opening couplet has this very powerful suggestion of the sun and plants giving life to something non-human. Thinks how it wakes the seeds. So it's capable of bringing seeds to full consciousness and wakefulness, which is ironic given the fact that they are, they're non-human, and the sun here can't animate this human body. So it seems ever more futile for it to attempt to do so. And think how it once woke the clays of a cold star. Now this is a brilliant line. And the C alliteration in this personification emphasizes its power, that it could wake up the clays of a cold star, that the sun itself could bring life and vitality to an inanimate clay object in the cosmos, and that it has this power of animation. And again, that contrast between that vast power of animation to bring animate life and energy to the clay of a star stands in great contrast to its futile effort to resuscitate this man that has had the life taken out of him by violence on the battlefront. So the alliteration in that quote is emphasizing that great power, but also because the power is emphasized, we see the great sense of futility in the effort to bring this man back to life on the battlefield. And then the questions that end this part: our limbs so dear achieved, our sides full nerved, still warm, too hard to stir. So we think of the first image of limbs so dear achieved. Think of the thousands of years of evolution in this image. Since the sun has revived a cold star, limbs have been dear achieved by this gradual process of evolution. And yet here they are being pointlessly destroyed on the battlefield. That compound phrase there, dear achieved, emphasizes the cost of the loss of life and the preciousness of that life itself, that those dearly achieved, those expensively achieved, but also with great feeling, achieved with great feeling, those limbs that have been achieved in that way are too hard to stir now. And then our sides of the body, full nerved and still warm, too difficult to stir. So the imagery here is of this body that is still equipped for life. It's full nerved. And so it reflects on the qualities of the body that deliberately highlight and reflect the sudden loss of life and vitality from this body. And that still warm body in the hyphenated phrase develops this contrast between the body's temperature and the snow, and also that sense of life having only just disappeared from this body. They're still warm and yet too hard to stir. How can it be, this question seems to ask, that a body full of nerves and still warm with beating blood is too difficult to stir, and yet this sun in the past has awoken the clays of a cold star? How on earth is that possible? Those questions seem to ask us. Was it for this the clay grew tall? And this rhetorical question here, he talks about the clay here, the inanimate mud that evolution has dragged out of a state of unconscious non-existence into humankind. Was it for this, all of that careful development, that evolution took place to be mindlessly gunned down on a battlefield? And that question there suggests the poet's exasperation at mankind's pointless, futile destiny on the battlefront, of dying meaninglessly in great numbers for nothing, for no reason. And then that final couplet, oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? This is a kind of horrifying final question. What was the point in these sunbeams ever even waking us up from the lack of consciousness that we displayed on this planet before life existed? This is a great existential question about the meaninglessness of life. Why on earth would sunbeams toil to break Earth from its dormant slumber if its destiny is to die en great mass on the battlefield? So this choice of diction, fatuous, the adjective fatuous, describes the sun rays as pointless, which contrasts massively with the power that they have elsewhere in the poem. And so there's a great sense of despair and futility of existence itself in this final couplet. Why bother to exist at all if this is the pointless existence that involves, or that is created, by human life? And that choice of verb, sunbeams toiling, this great effort to toil means, to painful effort. And it suggests that the effort taken by nature over millions of years to produce life, only to have it then mindlessly and pointlessly destroyed. What is the point of nature toiling over thousands of years to then have the product of that toil, mankind, mindlessly destroy itself? And then that final question, to break Earth's sleep at all. So we end that with that final line of Earth's sleep. What was the point in even rousing Earth from sleep, where in the beginning of the poem we've got the sun waking the man from sleep? It had the capacity to do that. And now it's the poem ends with the question, why bother breaking Earth's dormant, sort of insensate, unconscious slumber if its destiny is to create this sense of disastrous death and destruction?